the Facebook data center. The Facebook data center and Apple data center on the right side, just like Area 51 and the nuke sites, all the way up here is the Hanford Nuclear Waste Storage Facility from the Manhattan Project. They're all on the sides of these star forts.
It seems like an electrical circuit formula that's repeated over and over.
Exactly. And welcome, Eric. We got Eric Hecker back. Welcome, good sir.
Had some technical difficulties before. I apologize.
No worries. Can hear you loud and clear now, brother. Good to have you.
Excellent.
I
was enjoying the conversation before. I was just on the tail end of my work shift, so I did not catch as much as I wanted to, just bits and pieces. But it's been fascinating, the work that you guys have been doing into these starports. As a tradesman, I've always been eyeballing these structures as way beyond the descriptions of what we were given. It just, what we were told doesn't make any sense.
Exactly, right? Like they're just too complex and too much resources and yeah, just it's so unpractical and over the top and just ridiculous for the time period that they claimed that they were needed. It makes zero sense. There has to be something so much more to it. And then when you get into fractal array antennas and just fractals in general and geometry, it all starts making a lot more sense.
You know how long it would take us to move that amount of Earth nowadays with all the massive heavy equipment that we have? I just look at those as job sites, and I just try to imagine how these guys got this work done without the tools that I have available to me. It's like, you got to be kidding me. There's no way. It's like, I don't care what you pay me, and you're like, hey, grab a shovel, Eric, and go help those guys out. Like, no way, no. I quit like immediately. We're not digging this. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
it's lunacy.
Bang on,
it would have to be, I would think, frequency of some kind. I mean, I would think cymatics frequency. You know how, I mean, when you vibrate sand or salt on a speaker and it gives you the shape of a whatever, that it could happen on a huge basis. And you were down in Antarctica, right? They're saying you were in Antarctica?
Yes, I spent
Is it really?
Is it
truly cold? Is it truly cold?
Oh yeah, it's cold. It's cold for sure. There's no denying that. It's ruthlessly cold.
How about the summer though? Like compared, like is it hot in the summer when it's 24-hour sun though? Like does it
it's a relativity thing for sure, and there's a lunacy. So the hottest day that I was there was actually Christmas Eve, December 24th of 2010, and we got as hot as -5 degrees Fahrenheit, and it felt hot because of the atmosphere conditions being so thin. We were outside in t-shirts and you got too hot. The sun was cooking you. You did not feel cold.
Wow.
That's wild. That's so wild.
Yeah,
That's so cool.
It felt odd.
Did they let you go anywhere? I mean, if you wanted to go somewhere, could you like just take off and go somewhere? Or do you have to get permission to go? Obviously, the Russians have their spot and the different people have different spots.
Certainly you would need to get permissions if you wanted to get anywhere far. I mean, you can't commandeer a plane or a helicopter or anything. Actually, there's no helicopters that far.
It's just planes. Or something.
I mean, I took a snow machine at the tail end of my winter. I was there for close to a year at that point, and I absolutely scored a snow machine that I was not supposed to have. And I drove that until basically the facility, the South Pole Station, was like a dot on the horizon. But at that point, there's just nothing. There's nothing to see. I mean, it's an ice field at 10,300 feet of actual elevation. It is completely smooth and barren of anything to look at.
Is it really that high? I didn't even realize. 10,000 feet.
Correct. 10,300 feet. The continent of Antarctica is on average the coldest, highest, and driest. It's 0% humidity. Literally.
It explains why it's so cold. The height it's alone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The seismic, see, the thing that I've got about Antarctica, and I don't doubt that Antarctica exists, or I've showed it, with the shape of it. It's shaped like a pentagonal star fort. And that to me, it seems like there would be some seismic that would come from there. And instead, the entire 12 years that I've been online, we don't have not one single report of an earthquake down there below the ice, which we should pick up. I mean, we should be able to pick it up down in the plate, wherever that is down below. And then
all of the
guy,
normal outfits that pick these things up aren't picking stuff up there?
Correct. We don't pick up any seismic, and it's not reported to us. And the weirdest thing happened. A few years ago in 2016, I did a fundraiser for my channel, like a few $1,000s or something like that. And a fellow shows up. His name was Professor Astor. And Professor Astor showed up below my fundraiser. He's from the University of Colorado. And he called me a fraud and said, and furthermore, went off on me basically and told people not to donate to my fundraiser. It was really odd.
What was he calling you a fraud about?
Well, this is odd. He was talking about fracking earthquakes, and earthquakes can't be caused and induced by man-made drilling. Now, here's the weird part. He then went on to go down to Antarctica to install a bunch of new seismic sensors to detect the seismic activity from Antarctica.
So your work opposes his work, and he was worried about his grant?
I have no idea. It was really weird. I didn't know who the guy was. But he ended up going down to Antarctica and installing a bunch of seismic, which we don't get any info on. And did they ever, do you know of any earthquakes that were ever detected down there while you were there?
I don't. But then the other thing, like the first thought that crosses my mind is you have 2 miles of ice. Is it possible that that's a very effective dampener so that you don't feel the effects?
No, I think that would actually, in fact, cause more, or at least on the smaller scale quakes. You'd think they'd be happening all the time from the constant ice shifting.
Well, I mean, that did happen all the time. So how do you make a distinction? Like, we had ice quakes all the time, but I couldn't tell you that's an ice quake or an earthquake. What's the difference?
Right. With the fracture. Yeah, like with the fracture on an ice quake, I would think that it probably would look like an explosion or something. I don't know, but like it's really cool to think about that down below the ice sheet that there's of course the plate that it's scraping along, and then down in the plate there should be seismic that gets detected 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 50 kilometers down in the crust, down in the plate, and it doesn't get reported to us. I'm just wondering if there's some other reason. Like I found this stuff from
I would say this immediately. There's a massive lag on the info coming off the ice.
That would make sense. They might they report it later.
If something happened, the general public's not going to hear about it for 10 years. That's how academia works. That's how the whole entire system works.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, any scientist anywhere on the planet, Antarctica is not exclusive to this snail's pace of dissemination of information.
True.
Yeah, it is the last giant ice wall, and that it holds the answers to humans' past or to a lot of the mysteries of our realm. I just wanted to point out this old map there, Dutch. You were mentioning the inner sea, the old inner sea that was on the west side that went up to the Salt Lake there on the previous existence of North America. Probably before the Ice Age or whatnot, the catastrophe, but here is a map that actually has it depicted there before explorers have made it back over to the north area of North America after European recolonization of whatever genocide or reset catastrophe happened.
Totally. And when you look at it too, it matches up with where Salt Lake City goes back to, where we still have the remnants of the old ocean that's still there. Speaking of the old ocean and interior oceans, that gets back to Antarctica. We saw that there was this video from Bird back in the first expedition or second. It was the Lando Lakes. You guys know about that, right? The Lando Lakes.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh my God, this is crazy. It's declassified declassified film from the 1920s from the U.S. Army archives, U.S. Navy archives, a bird down there. And when it was maybe the second expedition, and they took
I don't think it was High Jump. I think it was the one after High Jump.
Right, they took planes and they flew all the way along and went interior to Antarctica And they said they flew all the way into the very center. But I was mind blown to see that. And they found this place that they called Land O'Lakes. And they said it was several hundred square miles of an area that was staying warm in the middle of winter. And that they landed their seaplane to take water measurements.
It had light. It was lit up though, Mike. It would have been North America's winter and their summer because it was daylight in that filmage. Because there was some footage of it that came out. That's original documented footage of these lakes you're talking about, and them being de-iced and melted.
Yeah, it would have been summer down there. Exactly.
Yeah, for it to be lit, it would have.
It would have been dark if they were flying during nighttime. Yeah, but they found it and they said that. I don't know. I'll go get the before we go, I will actually get the it's from a channel called Periscope Films, who restores old film footage that's donated to them, and they got the U.S. government. So check out Periscope Films; they've got it. But
totally.
And now
I have a curiosity on the way to figure stuff out on that direction, because I am curious about what's going on down there as well. And what we can start to conclude is if we know what type of plane it is, people can actually look up. Like, it's going to take a very specific flight pattern. This hole has to be a particularly large hole for you to fly a plane in.
Oh, these were freshwater lakes, Eric, and the footage. I've seen the footage too.
It's like on the surface.
Pull it up here.
I'm not denying it. I'm just trying to figure out how we can find it.
Yeah, it was.
Oh yeah, I'm saying, like, when a plane comes in for landing, it doesn't just see a hole in the ground and then dive down into it. You know what I'm saying?
No, it was freshwater lakes that they saw. So no, this one that Mike's talking about, because there's two stories. There's the story of when Admiral Byrd went into the center and experienced the inner earthness and whatnot. But then there's this second one that Mike Dutch is talking about right now. That is where they saw a bunch of freshwater turquoise-colored lakes with no snow, like melted rock beaches, pebble beaches, and just beautiful
if you're talking
colors.
On the surface, that could be everywhere.
Yeah, on the surface. It was on the surface, but
what he found,
rock and bedstone. It wasn't a glacial lake. They were like actual lakes in the bedrock, and that it was an amphibious plane. Maybe it was from Operation High Jump because they did have the aircraft.
I'd be curious to know what the plane
it landed, and there's color footage of them in it.
I'm sure there's tons of video from on the surface. I was curious about the inner one and what plane they were saying was for that, because then calculations could. I mean, there could be flight paths and hole dimensions figured out.
Yeah, he landed. What Byrd described as they landed. They first spied it from above, and they saw that there was no snow or no ice or anything, and that it was down to the surface. And then they landed the plane in the waters to test and see, and they found that the waters were somewhat temperate. And this was going on for hundreds of square miles, but they didn't test them all, obviously. But what they landed in was found to be temperate. And they specifically said that the shores were lined with fresh coal on the surface of the on the surface.
Right, one second, guys. I'm going to head off. Thank you for having me. Sorry I couldn't stay for too long, but feel a little bit tired after the event.
Oh man!
So, Dutch, I need to get a way to get in touch with you, because we definitely need to do a show together, talk about some stuff. I'd love to pick your brain and go over some proper history. And also, Eric, you sound like someone I want to talk to you as well. So if we could arrange something at some point, that'd be absolutely brilliant. And Gerald, you as well. So anyway, on that note, I will leave you guys. I hope you enjoy yourselves. Have a great stream. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer, but had a busy day, and I just popped in to do a bit. But anyway, thanks. It's been great.
Much love, brother.
He had corrective surgery earlier today, and still came in.
Yikes!
Always a pleasure with Luke.
Surgery sucks. Anyway, the long story short is that they found this multi-hundred-mile wide melted area that they said was melted year-round. I don't know how they would know that, but they found it lined with coal, and I thought that was interesting because, coal at the surface, and you've got a lot of water, coal and water, all you'd need is a boiler, and you've got yourself infinite steam power. Like, so
as a plumber, I was confused why they weren't doing steam heat down there compared to what they were doing with the glycol and heat exchangers and blah blah blah. Yeah, I've heard all of this stuff about Bird before, and have you never heard of the dry valleys?
Oh, I've heard the
Antarctica?
snowless parts. Yeah, I've heard of like
There's an area
I
called
haven't
the dry
seen
valleys
them,
that is but that's so he's I mean people don't realize that he can be discussing very benign things, and because they're not from these people don't have Antarctic experience, they just don't like. I get that the story sounds fantastical. I get that it can be fantastical. I'm not against that possibility, but there are also very present facts that also explain exactly what he saw. The dry valleys existed then, the dry valleys exist right now. His explanation could have been him flying into the dry valleys. It could be that simple. Is
it large areas of water in the dry valleys?
There is large areas of no ice where there's never been ice, and that's why they're referred to as the dry valleys. They use them as a facsimile of the Mars landscape.
Yeah, they landed this plane in the water though, so that kind of.
I'm sure in the barrier areas between the dry valleys and the areas that are completely covered with ice, there's probably intermediate situations going on. I don't doubt that in the slightest.
100%, Eric. What you're describing sounds like what you see in the videos of it, and so these are supposed mountain/pyramids taken in Antarctica. And you said you witnessed at least one of these while you were down there.
I have to my right. I have a massive panoramic photograph of a mountain range in Antarctica. It's from the program. My roommate was also in the program. She got this photograph from a coworker, like a gift, right? And this you sprawl this thing out and then print it on the picture as each of the names of the mountains in the range. And as you're going through, there's mount this and mountain that and blah, blah. And then all of a sudden in the middle of it all, over one of the peaks, it just says pyramid. And it's the only one that's shaped like perfectly pointed. And it doesn't say Mount Pyramid or Mountain Pyramid. It just says pyramid. So to me, it's photographic evidence from the program that I happened upon somehow. Holy moly.
I love that.
That's how life happens sometimes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I brought this thing out to, what do you call them? Conventions and things like that. I showed it to Brad
Olson. It's on your wall right now.
It's rolled up in a tube right next to me.
Oh, darn it. I was like, come on, take a look.
I've put it on the internet for it. The problem is it's like this 16-foot long panoramic, right? So it's not meant to be put on a webcam for people to look at because it just looks all blurry at that point. There's no resolution. And then everybody's like, oh, you can't see it. You're a liar. And it's like, what do you want me to do? It doesn't translate through the medium. I mean, I can go hold up a picture for you right now and say, hey, here's a big photo of a mountain range.
Right? It's that you've experienced the pyramids down there yourself, or the pyramidal mountains. And once you've experienced something for yourself, you know it as truth because you've lived through it.
I've flown over the Transantarctic Mountains, and that was gorgeous to see all the glaciers. Like it looks like oceans in motion. You're up so high, everything looks like waves, and you kind of have to pay attention to the fact that it's not moving, but you can get the feel for the flow with great ease. The way everything's moving through the mountain ranges, you can see it all. Yeah, see images like this that you put up, like I see that image and I start to wonder the labor involved. And, just straight up, there are calculations that can be made from man hours. I want to know how many man hours were put on that site.
Oh, millions.
How many calculation? Right? How would you guys calculate it? I'm no expert on ancient construction, but how many men are needed for how many hours a day to do this from start to finish? What was there before this was there, before they moved all of this earth and structure? This is absurd.
Right? Yeah. Like the level of terraforming is insane because each one of these canals is literally a wall story down or up from each other, and that they've built these in perfect symmetry and level to be able to flow like that, keep the waters like that, and these massive walls up and up and up like that. It's insane to have to level it all, and that each one of these angles are at least 1, 2, maybe even up to like 3 or 4 stories of pure wall elevation between each level of these moats and their walls and what they're building, and that they have to have this inner same battery geometry, the battery unit that they've bastardized with the bastion fort that we find everywhere as the base of it. And then a lot of the time, the more advanced, then you're going to have an outer shell of with the water in between it insulating, and then between that, then these additional radial pieces. And it's like, these don't make sense for battle sake. Like, what the heck is this little square here, this little square, this little, like, from people attacking? Like, no, that's not logical in any sense. Like, and that with horse and cart and shovel, and how the heck would they even level it or get this above perspective to be able to understand this perspective of above, and then what they're going to have to level on the ground, and then actually start doing it all with animal and manual labor? Like, are you freaking kidding me? This is next to impossible.
And no instantaneous communication either. So, I mean, you're trying to get it down to a point on either side. I mean, just think about it, guys. This is the man hours. You're right. It'd be like 20 trillion man hours. And how many bulldozers nowadays do you think it would take? I mean, geez, this is insane. Horse and buggy.
And then I also think too about like practical reality on a job site, right? How do the folks back then convey the information from the architect's head to the tradesman's hands? We have blueprints and stuff nowadays in conversations, right? How did they practically do this back then? Did they have blueprints for all these facilities that we don't have? Like, what was the medium of communication? Since you're right, they don't have, a way to do it across the site, but let alone how do they even convey the idea? This is what we're going to build.
Yeah, like it would take a day's journey just for one person to take one of the prints to the worker on the other side of the city, because they'd have to like walk it or hike it or take a freaking horse. Like it's so impractical.
Well, that star fort that you showed out in the Florida Keys earlier, how many bricks were built? Like, what? How many boats worth of bricks did they send out there? Are you kidding me?
Was it 16 million? I think.
Yeah. How do you get truckloads of bricks on and off a wooden?
Yeah, and they built
at the height of the
island.
Civil War. Where do you get the manpower at the height of the Civil War to do that?
How many meetings would it take literally to build just one section of wall?
Coordinating that star fort being built over there.
Impossible.
Like it's
we've got a hidden history. I mean, it's pretty obvious there's a hidden history. I'd say the one place where we don't have any clue on it is where there probably would be down in Antarctica, where it's just 10,000 feet of ice, and anything down below is going to be scraped away anyway, so we wouldn't have evidence there, and it would be so old anyways that you wouldn't know. Like
I can tell you this much: when they were drilling, being a relative term, using hot water to remove the ice to get down to do stuff for the ice cube neutrino detector installation, they were hitting trees and palm trees and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah, I've heard of that too.
There was stuff in the ice for sure.
It was
palm
tropical,
ice?
subtropical plant and animal like matter and fossilization they'd find underneath the ice and in the sludge.
They found all kinds of weird. They found a crate of old hot dogs from some old expedition, and they ate them and got sick.
Finding palm trees, though, that's huge. I mean,
apparently it's the exact in Alaska too.
About the woolly mammoths that were frozen, I don't know where that was, but there were those flash frozen
over by Fairbanks.
Is that what it was up north? So
yeah, over by Fairbanks, the guy had 5-acre property. He's got over 10,000 woolly mammoths on it.
Wow.
Yep.
The boneyard there, right?
Yep.
Like
correct. Yep.
And that a lot of what they're finding is that the plants are like tropical-ish or like just subtropical, definitely a lot, not just northern, but actually tropical and what's in between it? I don't know. Sorry.
People don't realize right now the southern part of Alaska right now is a rainforest.
Yeah, that's on the coast. Right. Well, how far north is Alaska, right? Because you're in Alaska.
Freakishly north. Alaska's just massive.
But
the state of Alaska is 1/3 the size of the lower 48.
To where you were in with what you experienced in the South Pole in a year at the South compared to where you are in Alaska in a year in the North.
I've been to the South Pole Station, which is 90 degrees south, but I've also been to places as far north in Alaska. I think I was up near 72 degrees up in Barrow, Alaska, Ukqiavik, which is the furthest northern point in Alaska. I did some work up there, so they do get 24 hours of darkness in the wintertime for a bit. I guess they get 24 hours of sun for a little while too in the summertime. I don't think I spent as much time up there in the summer though, but it gets cold in Barrow, but nowhere near South Pole. I think the coldest that I saw in Barrow was maybe -20 or -30 or something like that Fahrenheit.
Okay, so pretty much the same temperature as I'm experiencing in southern Alberta, Calgary.
Probably. I would be surprised if it gets colder than -40 Fahrenheit in Barrow, which is the same as -40 Celsius. So you'd be familiar with that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then how warm does it get in the winter too when it's pitch black there? I remember a couple last year, 2 years ago, it was right around Christmas and super dark, and you were in above freezing temperatures for a week or two or something, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, we get weird warm spells every now and then for sure. You talking about up here in Alaska? Yeah,
yes, sir.
I mean,
yes, sir.
Yeah, it gets cold in the wintertime, but it's not brutal up here actually, and it could warm up freakishly at any point in time. Today we were supposed to be in the 40s, but it's going to wind up not happening. And we got snow everywhere right now.
Right. So, Dutch, I'm bringing this up in regards to a little bit we've talked off air about the weather and the weather patterns and how what we're being told of what it is might not necessarily be exactly that. And that there's been this extreme, especially North America or Americas, where on the East Coast, it can be extremely hot. It will be the exact opposite on the West Coast and be in an exact freeze, but it extends all the way down pretty much into Mexico now, and it goes back and forth all winter long, where now Texas and Mexico are getting snow each year, and that it can be warmer in Alaska when it's close to 24 hours of darkness, warmer there than it is in Mexico, pretty much it's just nuts. Or I guess not. It would have to be Florida, not Mexico, because it's on opposite sides. When one is hot, one is cold.
USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, I think in 2018 or maybe it was 2017, I don't know the exact year, announced that they are new growing guidelines for farmers and people who plant crops outdoors. And they had it organized by a 1, 2, 3, and 4 category going up north. And they shifted every area north by one full number north, whereas stuff that would normally be planted down in Arkansas and North Texas can now be planted up in Missouri. And they shifted that whole thing to the north, all the way to the North Pole, by changing the numbers and saying that's due to climate change, whatever you want to call that, and that the warmer latitudes are shifting northwards the same year. Actually, this was 2012, so it wasn't 2017. It was 2012. And the way I know it was 2012, same year, a bunch of airports across the country shifted their there's a magnetic declination for pilots that's set into a magnet at the airport, basically along the runway, so you can find your way in the darkness or anything else. Anyway, they had to shift the magnet slightly because north had shifted slightly, which we all know is shifting slightly and heading over towards Siberia and picking up pace heading over towards Siberia. And they keep track every year. You can see the progression of the pole, the magnetic pole going over towards Siberia. Now, this gets in with Edwin Haley.
That last picture, does anybody know what that was? The Sundog one? The one on the right there?
Yeah, so this one right here, the drawing?
Yes.
It looks like a couple of comets and some sort of alchemical astrological...
I meant the source. Any idea where that came from?
No,
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm intrigued that it matches the Sundog so well.
Exactly,
That's
right?
Perfect match, actually. Yeah, it is.
Truly.
That was something that I did witness down in the summer season at the South Pole. I don't know to what iteration, but it was multiple iterations outward. When the sundogs grow into their different iterations and get more complex, they really start to look like a giant flower of life in the sky. And I saw one that was very complex one time, and it had a lot of the circles and the nodes, and I couldn't begin to tell you what level it was, but it was nuts to see happening.
Really?
Yeah, they get that one's just starting. The one on the left, they're starting to get bigger, and the top ring will grow, and then more rings will grow around the sides, and it actually starts to wrap around your entire horizon line. They get more. You can look up pictures on. You can look up pictures. They grow in a very determined fashion, like in the different stages and such.
Can you actually watch them grow line by line, or is it sort of like a field growth?
It was. I think it was the latter. It was more like a field growth. It was more like it was more like in a way it seemed like it was like something that you felt like it was there all the time. You couldn't see it. It was like it was materializing in front of you.
That's awesome.
It was like all in sections.
This looks like underground tunneling beneath the fields coming out from the star fort. This is tunnels, and look at the freaking geometry and weirdness. What could be the rationale purpose of this?
It makes me think of a Tesla valve, the check valves, the no parts check valves, the one-way valves.
Oh, yeah.
Tesla makes. That's what that makes me think of.
That's what that is. It's exactly what that is.
Water flow.
That's water underneath, probably, then keeping it in check.
Interesting.
Did you guys happen to hear, it was not that long ago, there was some information that just came out to the public, which was an example of what I was saying before. That's interesting. That the information comes out in a lag. When I was in Antarctica, when I was on the ice, I was hearing information at the time. So to me, it was understood. I was present in a place where this information was understood. They were already discussing the massive waterways in between the ice sheet and the continent, like rivers and stuff like that, and that there would be large caverns because the rivers flowing are at a completely different temperature than the ice above it, so it would carve out like a half pipe above the riverbed, and there would probably be shorelines and stuff like that. These were just things that I heard back then, and it was only just this year that apparently they came public, and they were like, oh, we flew planes over with LiDAR. We just figured out. And it's like, just figured out seems to be a really screwy way of saying things.
Mm-hmm.
I remember learning about that at least 15, 20 years ago.
Now they're doubling down on that. It's a massive river system. They said equal to any other river system of any other continent that we see that's not covered with ice.
Wow.
Really? And then isn't this the actual two chunks of Antarctica? It's supposedly this is actually what it looks like.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
The water, and that there's this water sea between the two.
Well, that totally makes sense, right? Because the vast majority of the land mass of the continent of Antarctica is below sea level. So you go slapping ice on top of it, right? And then you have mountains that cut through that and peak all the way up. Well, down at sea level and or below sea level, it affords a lot of opportunity for there to be waterways in between the ice and the land.
Very good.
Pretty much what Hitler's guys were saying back in the day.
Right.
It's the same thing is the same thing that John Warner III, the former Secretary of the Navy that passed away recently, disclosed that we had submarines throughout Antarctica utilizing these waterways.
Really?
When he was asked about why, his response was space operations.
That explains the lack of reporting of earthquakes, guys.
I would agree with that. I mean, that if they're going that far, it would cover a lot of lack of reporting for a lot of stuff.
Totally. That would explain everything.
Mm-hmm.
My mind.
Once you add submarines to the mix, everything's quiet. It's the silent service.
Literally, that gets into the submarine base out in the middle of the Mojave and the supposed connection from the West Coast to the Mississippi River. There's this video on YouTube from several years ago of two ex-U.S. Navy SEALs or whatever, and they're on camera, going on record, you can believe them or not, that they say that starting at Monterey Bay off the west coast of California, that there's a undersea connection of tunnels, and that the United States is more like a plate going over the top of an ocean, and that they take submarines all the way into Nevada and then all the way through underneath the plate and come out in the Mississippi River in a freshwater pocket that comes up through the center of the plate, and that they're able to take saltwater subs out in the ocean, bring them into freshwater, and come up and go down the lock and dam canal system of the Mississippi River. This is all in a video I watched. I'm like, what the heck? Now you got... Yeah, this is years ago. I saw that video.
So if they could do that maneuver, they should be able to pull off the Antarctic maneuver.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I mean, it's if there's underground caverns, you can certainly bet that the submarines would use them if they could.
They do biannual exercises up here in the north under the ice with the submarines. Ice X happens every 2 years.
Yeah, off the coast of Alaska and stuff.
Yeah, they're testing to operate under the ice, which means you can't surface. So that's, let's just say that might be getting a boat ready to go and do a little bit more developed operations.
Well, yeah, but I'm just thinking of like the size of the ice sheet up there, and like it's essentially a continental-sized ice sheet, especially in the winter. And that's at least what they claim to be there. And if they are traversing that entire thing, that's the same lengths and conditions as what you're speaking about in Antarctica of navigating those lakes and underground rivers and passages through the ice.
I think it's actually more of a psychological test for the crew of training. I assure you that the submarine crew.
Oh, for sure.
Wants the ability to spawn that boat. You know what I'm saying? When you get on a submarine and you go underwater and you have to do your submariner's job,
no rescue if something goes wrong.
Can surface, right? But you take that away, and that crew now has an issue. So I believe the Ice X operations, I don't think it's so much about the maneuverability training of tight quarters. It's just simply you can't get up. You still have you have a ceiling now, but you still have your left and right movement. You still have depth that you can go to. You just can't surface willy-nilly anymore. You might be able to find a thin spot. Certainly they do training to puncture through the ice. They do that every training with IceX. But I think it's more of a psychological training for the crew to get acclimated to not being able to surface.
Before I change the subject here and what's up this star for it, you can see the water of how they have the canals running through. It's like probably 15 different, 10 connections to the outer one going in, and then 3 inner circles. And that this is what, Milano, the city of Milano.
And just so you know, Bernie, in 1994, I was in the subservice.
But then what the heck was what?
Hey, thank you for your service, man. That's got to be a heck of a job to be down in the submarine, man.
It wasn't much of a participation on my side, Dutch Sense, to be honest. It was a very peculiar enlistment, which is worthy of other conversations. I learned a lot of weird stuff about what's going on in the world from my short time in the submarine service. But I wound up getting myself out technically. So I don't need any.
You fake claustrophobia or something, right? Like...
That's funny.
Yeah, no.
Okay, I remember what I wanted to ask.
There's a lot going on under the water that they're not telling us about. You're 1,000% correct. There was technologies that I saw in 1994 that they were apologizing to me for, saying, "Oh, it's an old boat. We have old tech. We're so sorry. We're going to get upfitted." And that was stuff that the rest of the world didn't see for 40 fucking years. Touch screens on phones and stuff. You think Steve Jobs invented that? Come on.
Mm-mm.
These everybody out there that's loaded gets handed everything. We pay for it with our tax dollars. Our research and development goes into some program, and then some buddy of some pal gets handed all the info, and then they become indebted to them. And that company now makes shitloads of money, and you think that the outfit that got them started can't dip into that? You think the CIA gets you all set up and then leaves you alone? Yeah, here's your billion. I heard they never do. Yeah, we're never going to touch any. You're never going to do anything for us.
You do everything for us, you mean?
So, Dutch, I wanted to bring up that you made several very interesting and fascinating discoveries over monitoring of these cycles, these energies, as well as the satellites and sensor information feeds over the years. One being the radar, sorry, forgive me, I'm a little tired. Which type of radar was it that causes the tornadoes and the toroidal spinning, as well as all these energy laser beam blasts as well? Oh, Michael, there you go. You're muted.
Oh my God. Okay, hold on. Let me get this can of worms and let me open it up. We've got so much that we could talk about when it comes to this. I could go on for 3 hours. This is where I got into all the trouble. This is where I got my channel shut down. This is where this was the forbidden topic, which is directed energy weapons. It was said to not exist. It was said to be a conspiracy. It was said it couldn't happen. It said it couldn't be done. And I understand.
Wait, pause for one sec. So, because this could get us shut down, and since Zertis isn't here and Campbell left, I'm going to shut down on both of his channels, and we will just be live on my 2 remaining channels. So I will post the links on that and fully continue aspect of it.
The forbidden word, man. The forbidden word. The H word.
Yeah.
Do not say it. It's like Baltimore, but HARP. So I'm not blaming HARP. HARP is just the go-to word that everybody talks about. Again, HARP is the High Frequency Active Aurora Research Program up in Alaska, does ionospheric research, and it can heat little pockets in the atmosphere and ionosphere up above HARP. It's not controlling your mind in Australia, and it's not fracturing the earth in Turkey. Okay, we can rule those things out for HARP, I think, personally. But what I found, this goes back to 2011, and I noticed this quite by accident. This actually started on New Year's Eve of 2010 going into 2011. On New Year's Eve, thousands of animals fell out of the sky. Thousands of birds fell out of the sky in Greenbrier, BB, Arkansas. And they exploded from the inside. They were cooked. They tried to blame it on fireworks at first, but it turns out there was no fireworks done in the area for New Year's. And this was in a rural area in Greenbrier, BB, where they're doing a lot of oil and gas drilling. So I was thinking it could have been something to do with maybe an oil and gas release, maybe some kind of toxic chemical made its way out and the birds inhaled it or something and exploded the birds, burned them inside. I don't know. And within a couple days of that happening, of the birds falling out of the sky, and it was like 10,000 birds. It wasn't just a couple. It was whole towns were covered in birds, guys. It was a lot. And within a couple days, a series of thousands of earthquakes then hit at Greenbrier, BB, Arkansas, right next to where the birds turned up dead on New Year's Eve. So I got a little suspicious or whatever, and I decided to go see if there was any weird weather in the area that could justify all the birds somehow exploding internally, and also explain the earthquakes. Maybe you could find something going on with earthquakes there. Could explain maybe a gas release from the hydrogen sulfide or something coming out of the ground that kill all the birds. So I go to the radar and I go look at Greenbrier, and coming out of the area just north of Greenbrier, BB, Arkansas, right at the NexRad radar station, the NexRad radar station is pulsing in bright red. It looks like a giant red storm over 500 square miles. It's the whole radar pulsing in a giant ring at once, instead of a beam going around, instead of the rotating dish like you would see from a NexRad radar going around. This was one giant pulse coming up from the center of the dish and going out to the perimeter of the radar station, 500 square miles in all directions.
It looked like a flower when it was going
giant
up.
Red signature looked like a storm. And I made a video on it and put it out. People said I was faking it. They said I must be photoshopping it. And I was like, what? I'm like, here's the link, dude. And they came back and said, oh, no, you're not faking it. You're actually just seeing a switch between clear air mode and precipitation mode. It's nothing. And I said, no, this is staying in precipitation mode the whole time. I'm sorry, it's staying in clear air mode the whole time. They're pulsing this thing, but it's going out all at once. I don't understand how this is happening, because we're talking about a dish that goes around inside of the NexRad. It's a microwave dish. Well, what I found out, long story short, within 72 hours of me making that video, a tornado formed and went and hit the center of the transmitter where the pulse came from originally. So birds die. Pulse, I go to check the day later, and there's this pulse happening. There's earthquakes happening there, and then the tornado forms and hits the center of the transmitter. Now, that happened about 1,500 more times at every radar station across the entire country, including Hawaii and Puerto Rico. The earthquakes, the animal deaths, the pulses, and the storm hitting the center of the pulse within 72 hours. Now, what's going on there with the pulse, I found out this has to do with tuning of the klystron, which is a very complex term. The klystron is a tube that's in there that's powering the radar. It's amping up the power, basically, from a little bit of power. When you read the NexRad description for the weather radar, it tells you they're using 7 clothing irons worth of power. What a description, right? For the housewives who are reading, I guess that's going to make sense. 7 clothing irons worth of power going in. And then they, quote unquote, well, they don't say that, zap it up. But the klystron zaps it up in a chamber of its own, a separate resonance chamber that increases the power up to 750,000 watts of peak transmission power from the klystron tube. And I found a training video from the National Weather Service last month about how to tune the klystron tube and what frequencies are producing this giant pulse that I'm seeing, that I was seeing and we still see. And it turns out that the NexRad pulses when they're tuning the klystron in megahertz, not gigahertz. Now, this matters. This ties in with HARP. This is how NexRad radar rings got the term SLAME HARP rings, because HARP is operating 0 to 10 megahertz at the most, up to 10 megahertz, but they can go lower. HARP can go lower, down in say, single megahertz. And NexRad is pulsing up to 19 megahertz. Different methods for tuning the klystron, depending on which tube you get from who makes the tube. Apparently, there's different levels, and it's like 17 megahertz or 19 megahertz. And in the training video, it goes over right down to the very fine points. And in the training video, they say their goal is to create the most output. The guy starts out in the National Weather Service training video. The goal is to achieve the peak power output of 750,000 watts. So what they're doing is they're pulsing. The big pulse, not the beam, but just a big, huge red pulse, is high frequency pulsing, and they're turning the dish all the way up to its highest tilt. Instead of pointing out like this, going around and around, or like this, it's tilted as high as they can get it to get it out as far as it can reach, and the whole dish turns into a high frequency antenna when the klystron is put into its calibration phase, how to calibrate the klystron. And what happens is the NexRad dish is as wide as a high-frequency antenna would be in your backyard if you're doing high-frequency, a 19 megahertz transmission in your backyard with a shortwave radio, but it's 750,000 watts, and it vibrates. And I found, and this is my own findings on HARP, they found that this isn't my findings. I mean, I found the findings from HAARP where they found that the resonance vibrates back and forth for up to 3 days from HAARP up in Alaska with 1 billion watts. So this is more like 1 million watts. So it's 1 million times less powerful than HAARP. But the NexRad radar only has to cover a few hundred square miles around the transmitter where the next one picks up. And it turns out they overlap the stations perfectly. And then we can get into Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden and scalar and what happens when you cross beams and scalar. Scalar when we get into CERN. CERN's doing scalar. CERN over in Switzerland is taking banks of these klystrons, and they'll take a small particle of iron that they strip off like you do with your monoatomic gold. They will strip off a particle of iron. A company does this for them and presents it to them already. They don't do this at CERN. They get basically a version of that, but it's in a powder form. And they shoot a small, tiny particle of iron or whatever using microwaves. Banks of klystrons, hundreds of klystrons hooked up in daisy chain to one another, where they put in a little power, and out the other end comes picowatts, which is insane amount of energy. And then they have 2 banks of these. One beam goes one way around klystron, or the klystron beam goes one way around CERN this way. The other beam is going this way, and they collide. And where they collide, that's the scalar. And they call it the scalar Higgs boson that they're studying, where they collide the beams and shoot particles together. Same thing's done with the NexRad. But it's over a vast distance, and it's only 1 million watts, so it creates a tornado instead of ripping the Earth apart.
Yeah, they use electromagnetic resonance when they're doing that. Those cross frequencies are like
look for this, guys. Look for the radar stations to go into pulse mode. All you have to do is look at the non-quality control feed from the NexRad, and they censor these out, by the way. They take out the pulses, so you don't see them because they call them anomalies. Quality control, they call it, I'm sorry. Quality control, got to take it out. But if you look for the pulse, watch for the storm to hit within 72 hours. Hail, severe wind, damaging. The Weldon Springs NexRad radar here in St. Louis has been wind hit 100 times since I've been watching. 105. And the tornado forms and hits the center of the transmitter in the National Weather Service office when they don't misdirect it. And they can totally control it now. So they can stop the tornado as much as they can start it. But do they? No, usually don't. I've seen that they let it hit the National Weather Service office because they don't want to admit that they're causing the rotation to begin with to come into the center of the rotating transmitter that's transmitting 750,000. Anyway, that's called HAARP rings.
Because
I got in big trouble for talking about it.
Wouldn't be a conspiracy anymore.
Guess who manages the NexRad?
It's why you will always...
The U.S. Army. U.S. Army replaces all the components in your NexRad and the U.S. Air Force. At the Air Force Base, it's the Air Force guys. But it's the military. They maintain all the NexRads across the country because it's part of the WSR-88, Ronald Reagan's missile defense system from 1988, when they rolled out the NexRad radar in 88. It wasn't just coincidence. It's freaking Ronald Reagan missile defense, baby. We're shooting down that stuff as fast as we can with the scalar. And so...
Have you considered you were observing directed energy weapons warfare?
The DWO. The Directed Energy Weapons Warfare Office, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, I'm saying what you witnessed. Have you considered that you were simply observing directed energy weapons warfare?
Oh yeah, definitely. It could even be that our radar stations.
It's a battle. That's what's. They're fighting each other. There's people fighting each other with directed energy weapons.
There could be a third party up above punking our radar. I've proposed this, that it might not be us causing the tornado to come to our transmitter at all. That it could be either from an outside source or even on the ground, somebody punking our radar, giving it too much energy in the electromagnetic field, doing the same thing, but from like hitting our radar with it. And then that causes a tornado to form and it comes in and hits us. It could be that too. Yeah, it definitely could be. It could also be in space. Yeah.
I'm obligated to inform you because of the dates that you threw out there and your question. You threw out that you said December to January 2010 to 2011, correct? I was at the South Pole Station and we were commissioning the Ice Cube neutrino detector from construction to operations and maintenance. We, if you check the dates for Christchurch and the earthquakes that happened then, we did that. You're talking about these systems. This is what I'm disclosing. The IceCube neutrino detector also transmits. It is the world's largest phased array transmitter. It is a directed energy weapons system. My crew caused the earthquakes in Christchurch because it was the first time they were firing it and they were attempting to do something and they messed up. So they corrected fire. I don't doubt that the systems that you're talking about weren't hot and ready for us to do what we had to do. I'm certain everybody in that environment was paying attention to everything to get it dialed in correctly. If BurnEye wants to go to my website in the archive section, he can pull up my DOM document, which is my evidence from the university. Basically, the manufacturer's specifications for the IceCube neutrino detector state that each of the 5,160 DOMs, each one of those DOMs can transmit at up to 2,047 volts AC.
I'm sitting here. I'm breaking out in slight sweat. Hold on.
I'm trying to find people that understand what I'm saying, but most people I talk to about this,
I know. This man right here fully understands what you're saying.
Wow.
So, Eric,
you're talking mass
private chat to your website.
Oh, I'm full screen somehow. This up. Did I click a button? I must have clicked a button. I think I'm full screen.
No, I did. I highlighted you.
Oh, okay. I'm like having a mind-blowing moment here. Like he's telling me, I'm like amazing. Wow.
So what you're saying is that's mass scale interferometry directed.
I imagine I'm not as technical, but I gather I can extrapolate what you're getting at. Yes, they can basically take a signal and like move it around, increase it, do it direction. Yeah. But regardless, just like we know from Tesla and scalar waves, I mean, once you turn this thing on, it impacts the entire planet instantly. If they want to do that. I mean, that's the other thing about directed energy weapons is that we have to really rearrange how our minds work. We can temporarily, we think about a weapon like a gun with a bullet in it and a particular caliber. And we're like, oh, it's a gun. What bullet does it shoot? Well, directed energy weapons aren't limited to a bullet. They can do all kinds of things.
Yep. They can change your...
Guys, we have to have a whole show just on this. I think we should do a whole show just on this topic at some point very soon here. Sure. I mean, like, because
with Jeremiah and Jeremy Reese, the alien scientist. This is exactly the technical group of. We will have the uber nerd out of nerdouts that connects all these great minds that understand these things and that have been working on it and experiencing it, and documenting it all, and bringing it together. For the last maybe 10 minutes here, Dutch will end it exactly at 5 hours. But for all of those joining in that aren't aware of Dutch's epic, pretty much 2 decades, at least a decade and a half now, of daily monitoring the system of seismic energies and activities, and his beyond epic record of forecasting earthquakes and his weekly updates of them. Just give us a little rundown and this week's forecast, if you don't mind, good sir.
He has the system of all systems. He's got it figured out, that's for sure.
I'm just happy because I believe he's familiar with the earthquakes that happened in Christchurch back then.
Oh, yeah. You know, you mentioned the Christchurch earthquakes. That is very, very interesting because FEMA was down in Christchurch in the hours leading up to the Christchurch, and then they took off an hour before.
Back then?
Yeah. FEMA was down there just by chance, they said. Just by chance. By the way,
by
North Island.
Yeah. Yeah, by chance when we turned on the IceCube detector.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm starting to get. We're going to have to. You and I have to talk. This is so intriguing to me about the neutrinos and everything. This is projecting and transmitting a phased array down in the ground. Man, we got to talk about this.
Mm-hmm. The ELF is on as well. I confirmed that myself. There's an ELF system there that they state is off. But I went right to the breaker panel that supplies it. It's on.
That is. My God, I got to get down to Antarctica. You ready to go? Let's go. We're gonna get a cruise ship. I'm gonna get a cruise ship. We're gonna all go. They'll sink it, of course.
Let's
Don't worry.
contact Mr. Beast for round 2 for him. He can pay for it. YouTube can pay.
Exactly. I would love to go down at some point, but I don't think they'll let me come back. Now, just real quick on the seismic. For instance, New Zealand, we had warned New Zealand, the North Island, for up to a 5.5, and warned the central part of the island of what we call the catcher's mitt position, which looks like a catcher's mitt here. And it just got hit within the past couple hours at 2 hours ago. A 5.3 to 5.5 just hit our warned area in New Zealand. You can check it off the list. That was one of the spots that we had issued the warning. But the way it goes is the earthquakes start down below the plates with the deep quakes, and then they spread out and away and spread across the planet. I've got a whole video on this. I don't want to bore everybody here on your stream with my kind of update, but I'll tell you, we are watching on the antipode to the opposite side of the planet for new 7.0 level activity that we were watching for last week. I haven't issued the forecast on this yet. This is going to be in my new forecast in the next few days. Probably today or tomorrow, I'll be issuing the forecast, and we're going to issue a new warning for a 7 to strike in Greece over here on the west side, far over from Turkey. And it's the antipode of the 7 down here. And this gets to the whole opposite sides of Earth thing again. This gets into what happens when it goes through the planet and comes out the opposite side. But we're already moving down here. New Zealand already got hit. New Zealand's North Island's been hit. And it's going to go through the planet, and we're going to see new activity on the opposite side. Again, back and forth like a tennis match. But really, I think this gets into the neutrino detector and what's down in the plates. This gets into very low frequency and transmitting through the ground. Piezoelectric energy going through the crust. And that's just, my God, we could go on and on. But the forecast is going to call for that. My current forecast also calls for Northern California to be on watch for a new 5. That's not a big deal. We got 5s already coming in and 4s off the coast. It's not that big of a deal for California. The one where everybody... Alaska. Well, actually, it should strike east of you in Yukon, where the 2 rings are overlapping over here in Canada. So just east of Alaska, we should see a new 5.5 in the next 4 days, 4 to 5 days. Break off right here where the 2 rings overlap. I think that's Yukon. If not, that's right at the Alaska border. Right, Alaska technically comes down all the way down into here, but and then over to the west, the Aleutians. We're out back in the Aleutians, but right now, I think let's look at the smaller earthquakes. This is a real-time forecast, guys. So for my guy up here in Alaska, we have a line of earthquakes coming off. It looks like a ramp jumping up into Mount McKinley of just hundreds and hundreds in the last 2 days. This is a big increase in the number of earthquakes up in Alaska. We call that a frequency increase. So like we're kind of, if we were beating a drum, right? If we were beating a drum, we've now rolled into a snare drum roll. And there's so many, but this is next to a volcano right at the ocean. And I think that's Mount Sitka. Mount Sitka, I believe this is the name. I'm going on memory. We may see a new volcanic blast in the next week out here at Mount Veniaminoff. I don't normally forecast eruptions, but with all the seismic going on here, I'm thinking new blast out at Veniaminoff. Then after Veniaminoff, that's right out here where my mouse is, a new 5, which shouldn't be that big of a deal either. It'll be out in the ocean next to a volcano that just erupted. But the middle of the whole mess is where I'm going to look. And that's how we do forecast. And we look like it's like a wave in a wave tank. And we look to the middle of the wave tank where all the waves are interfering. And that's the spot where the next spot to break takes place. I don't know. I could go on for hours trying to explain it. Simply put, we're going to see a new quake up here in the 5.0 range. And my skeptics would always say, who cares? Right? They don't care on small earthquakes. We only care on big earthquakes. And so 7 over in Greece, it'll be the first 7 in a year or more for the whole area down there. And it will likely cause some serious damage, unfortunately. That's the part that sucks about having to report on this shit. Those are the ones that we pray
that you're actually wrong on, right?
I know. Right?
It's like those.
If I'm right, it sucks. And if I'm wrong,
we got to catch at that 5% inaccuracy. You pray they don't happen, right? But He called it down.
It's like energy.
We get like
it never disappears. It'll go somewhere else, but it never goes away. So like if I miss, if I'm warning Turkey and a 7 doesn't hit in Turkey, then on the opposite side of the planet, the 7 hits exactly. That's where the energy went. It didn't hit in Turkey. It went through or around and came out at the opposite down on the other side on the antipode. And now we've got on both sides of Earth 2 7s in a course of 5 days apart. So the energy always transfers. It never goes away. So,
well, that brings me to my question. When it's bouncing back and forth in its antipode, does it actually ramp up and then like escalate onto another place rather than going from a 7? It goes to say a 7.5 and reverberates into another spot.
Yes, we see it increase when we pump in new deep earthquakes. When new deep earthquakes are added into that, it's like adding more energy into the mix that's already coming through. So in other words, like an earthquake, 7 hits in Turkey, energy's coming through or around the planet. I don't know which, but whatever way it's coming to the other side. And then a bunch of new deep earthquakes hammer on the other side where the 7's going to hit. And that then amps it up. Yes, it amps it up. Amp is the perfect word. Amplitude is increased as we pump more energy into the accordion-like wave that's going back and forth. I think it could be going back and forth between points through this, the round Earth, but it could be a disk Earth or a faceted jewel Earth, or well, it could be a matrix Earth. We might not be here at all, guys. I'm out of here later.
Yeah. Well, thanks for answering the question there, Dutch.
Much love, dude. Much love.
It is trash can Earth, both round and flat. Oh, come on, there we go. Did it work? Is it going back? My computer's sucking. All right. Trash can Earth. There we go. Trash can Earth, round and flat.
I like it.
And
flat
so
all
Dutch
the way around.
Dutch is the one person that when he's wrong, he actually, or his forecast doesn't happen, he's able to go back in and analyze and figure out where that energy is, and 10 out of 10 times show exactly where it is and puts it immediately into his next update. Usually we'll type it like, hey guys, I found where it went, and it's that it reaffirms just how real your system is, and that it's the actual energies and flow and waves of just how the Earth works, but that, like you said, it doesn't disappear. Energy will always go somewhere else, and that you always find.
Oh, definitely. The energy always goes somewhere. And I also am the only forecaster in the world who comes back and beats himself up when he gets it wrong. I wish the National Weather Service would do that. And same with the NOAA Hurricane Forecasting Services. When I get it wrong, I will not issue a new forecast. I will get out the whips, like they use in the Mideast, and they're like beating themselves up for being bad. I'm going to do that for myself. And but I seriously take it serious. When I miss an area, I will not issue a new forecast for that area until I figure out where it's like a flood. If you saw a big storm drop a bunch of rain and then the river starts to flood and you're like, dude, it's going to flood downstream. You go downstream and you're standing there and it doesn't show up. You're going to wonder which way it went. You're not going to think the water evaporated, right? You'll be like, oh shit, it went down that other flow down that way and it didn't go to where I was expecting. It went to somewhere else, but it never disappears. And that's kind of like what it's like. It's like a flowing river of seismic wave, a very low frequency wave going through the plates, which is why I've got to talk to Eric about the neutrino detector now. God, another thing. This is the last thing I need on top of CERN, brother.
Eric, you don't know the frequency of the ELF, do you? That they're producing?
No, I do not. I just know that it's on.
Okay.
And I'm sure it's working both ways as well.
That's so cool to know.
Which is unfortunate. Very unfortunate for the crew, what's going on down there, unbeknownst to most of the hands on site. is what they're riding on top of is not to their benefit. And it has a lot to do with my disclosure because I know it's a new term for everybody else, Havana syndrome. But when you're at a directed energy weapons facility,
just about to bring that up. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, so this is part of why I'm coming out, because it's not fair what they're doing to people.
Yeah, they're they're reprogramming their electrical firing rate in their brain through ELF is basically what they're doing, and all kinds of other aspects. You can create cancer. You can lots of things can go on.
You can go back in the news. My winter site manager lost her mind. And I would say it was also because we were firing up the Ice Cube neutrino detector and they weren't sure how it was going to impact locals. So she made the news because she was trying to get herself evac during the winter season. She was claiming she had a stroke. The only thing she knew was she was effed up and she was trying to figure out what was the matter with her. And she got scared. This is our winter site manager. She was calling for an evac. She was the one that knew the evacs were. When she hired me on, she drilled into me like, you can't leave, right? And I was like, this is the lady that hired me. And then now she was trying to run out of the ice. And I would say that she did not have a stroke. When she got off of the ice and she went to Johns Hopkins University, they agreed with my assessment. She did not have a stroke. Something happened to her. She was hurt and wanted to leave. I understand the mentality and the situation. But yeah, I feel bad for my crew. I feel bad for my crew, and I feel bad for the people of this planet that do not understand the level of warfare that's happening around us right now.
Yep.
For those who don't know, the Havana syndrome is what he's talking about. Just to, you don't know that down in Cuba, the U.S. government has now officially admitted this, but they denied it for years. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden talked about it in the 80s, that the Russians and others have high-power microwaves and other radio devices that they use to penetrate walls, penetrate buildings, and penetrate your body. And high-power microwaves, high-power radio waves can severely affect your psyche, your bodily functions, and even induce sicknesses such as pneumonia and COVID even can be simulated with high-power microwaves. That's why the 5G talk and all that crap came in. But anyway, Havana syndrome, wow, man, we got to talk.
I would love to.
I have some information from Thomas Bearden and certain quotes from papers that he wrote before. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read a small one. Scalar EM is the brainchild of Lieutenant Colonel retired Thomas E. Bearden, a systems analyst and wargame specialist who's been advocating a view of electromagnetics which is based on the notion of a vast, unseen background of scalar energies as opposed to vector energies, which underlie all physical reality. So it's very connected to what is going on up in Antarctica and a lot of other places, like the H word that we won't say. And, interferometry is basically the basis of that technology and ground electron pumping, I guess you could say. So, yeah, it's dangerous stuff, definitely. Affects brainwaves as well. That's something that could definitely be gone into.
If you go to dtic.mil, which is discover.dtic.mil, which is the military's repository for all their information. Again, it's Defense Technical Information Center from the U.S. government. So, I mean, if you're going to the site, it's a .mil website. It's a military website. But if you go to dtic.mil, discovery.d, I'll post it into the chat room, and you search Bearden, Bearden, you're going to find a bunch of papers by Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden on file in the DTIC talking about the use of radio waves for influencing your mind and for weather modification and for missile defense and a bunch of other stuff that he wrote and all kinds of weird stuff. Psychotronic warfare, using directed energy weapons, using microwaves, planting thoughts in your brain, making you hear things, hear voices at a distance. This is all, he wrote papers from the U.S. Missile Command on the topic. So go check it out. If you get a chance, go over to dtic.mil, search Bearden, and you will find it.
He even brings up the fact that he could, well, not him, but the technology can affect people on a mass scale, making them melancholy or to that state where you really just don't care about what's going on around you. So definitely interesting tech.
Like when there was mass uprisings, like the Arab Spring in the Middle East back in 2011, that I was alive, but it was him or someone else, retired military, and claimed that it was them using satellites projecting down specific radio frequencies on this certain area in the Middle East there that then triggered everybody to be more angry. And when they brought them out on the protest,
breaking up,
I'm disappearing. Okay, I'm losing signal. We're 5 hours deep. And we will be doing this again. We should do this on a weekly thing. And Eric, Gerald, Michael, all of you actually are invited back next week, next Thursday evening, with myself, Jeremy Reese, Jeremiah, alien scientist Jeremy Reese, and the amazing Walter Bosley. If you know who he is, another great mind and individual that we will be going deep into UFOs, anti-gravitics, different higher dimensional physics and scalar technologies, waves, and all of the rest. So hopefully we can have you back for that, Dutch. And we will be definitely doing another one with Paul Cook right away, and with the Hutchinsons. And Eric, I'm going to make sure I email you for the next Jeremy Reese Alien Scientist stream I do. And Gerald, you were supposed to be on last night. I think we miscommunicated for our electro culture. Here now. As soon as it ended, I saw Dutch. I hassled him. We're here. Now I'm going to sleep, so I probably won't be doing a stream tonight on Electroculture. We'll do it very soon. Exactly.
All good,
much
brother.
love.
It's all good.
Everybody.
And completely.
It was a pleasure meeting all of you guys. Eric, Gerald, Bernie, thank you. You guys just so generous, very kind. I can't wait to pick your brains on everything. I've saved this as a video. I'm going to upload it to my YouTube channel so everybody can watch it back in its full glory. It'll be great.
Wow. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It was good meeting you. I can't wait to pick your brain, Eric, in Dutch sense. Like I said, I've been watching you since 2011, man. So, you know, it's good to finally meet you. And Bernie, well, I know you already, so I'm just kidding, brother. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely, brother. It's gonna be good when you come out to Calgary. And first, I'm sharing Gerald's channel right now in the live chat, and then I'm gonna be sharing Dutch's Sense channel in the live chat. But I'm pretty sure everybody, at least half my subscribers, came from you, Dutch. So, but for the other half, if you don't have Dutch Sense, you're definitely gonna want to subscribe to Dutch, especially if you're traveling to an area that is prone to earthquakes, as his expertise is like no other. And as I'm stuttering and flailing, I'm also trying to look up Eric's channel, which is Deciphering My Experience, I believe.
Deciphering.tv.
Okay, yeah, so you run your own streaming websites at deciphering.tv. And what's
awesome.
I got an archive section there with the documents for the stuff that I've been putting out there, so that, you know, everybody knows I'm legit. I'm not just making stuff up. I was really down in Antarctica. I really documented stuff, and there's a real problem that we really need to discuss.
That's awesome. That's great. I'll make sure I share it as much as possible.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to talking, and anybody can pick my brain anytime they want.
Great. I look forward to seeing you again.
One last fact that I have to throw in with earthquakes, with what Eric said about them firing up the neutrino thing and the New Zealand earthquake happening in correlation to that. It was also when they first fired up CERN to its most highest potential level, that on the opposite side, the Mongolia earthquake happened on the exact antipode of it at the exact same time that they fired it up. And I had the pleasure of talking and bringing that up with Nassim Haramine in person one time. And he was like, "You're the only other person in the world that recognized that." I was like, well, in this room, but there's more of us, just like in Dutch, Eric, and Gerald. Thank you all.
Isn't that where they blew this? Isn't that when they blew the super magnets and had to shut down for a couple of years to rebuild the system because they had outputted so much? Yeah, it might have been. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, that was. They blew the magnets, then they did it again, and they blamed it on a weasel getting into the power supply.
The weasel.
Right, the weasel.
Yeah. I love that clip. That was from
a lot of these systems. They integrate them so that, you know, something at the South Pole, something in Alaska, you know, each system can do a multitude of things itself, right? But then when you combine it and you integrate it with this system over here and this system over here, and then we put this one to this setting and this one to this setting, and yeah, I think what Dutch is up to makes a lot of sense to be able to follow the energies around the planet, because I guarantee that there's facilities that are like, hey, we're going to move our beam this way, you move your beam this way, we're going to cross over here, and let's see what happens. And then, oops, what? Oh, sorry, Christchurch.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then they escalate it and turn it into all-out weather warfare, and don't give two Fs about nature, the natural workings of things, or all of us citizens that, hey, if you F something up with all screw, we don't know how to fix it. And is that why there's such reports as supposedly the inner core stopped spinning or whatever the heck, but everything being wiki wonky? And on that note,
I think
we're 5 hours in.
Fair enough.
All right, last thoughts, Eric. Last thoughts. Last words.
Responsible for Turkey. I think the South Pole Station destroyed Turkey, and this is a shame that the
timing.
We've moved the battlefield into the civilian world. War has always been an attack on the resources of a nation, but we did it indirectly, remotely, on the battlefield through the medium of soldiers. We've changed the face of war on this planet. We've removed the soldiers. We're attacking the people and the resources directly. This is a new chapter in hell.
Yep.
Well said. That's well said.
Yep. I'll add to that as my last comment. I believe that 12,500 years ago, we did something similar, created scalar wars, and destroyed that which we were all connected to. Maybe call it Tartaria, call it Atlantis, call it both, if you will. But I believe that this is similar to what's happening prior. That's my end.
I agree.
That's actually fascinating you say that, Gerald. Farsight remote viewing, they kind of did a remote viewing session on that time frame and the underwater runes that they found off of the Azore Islands as well as off of Antarctica, the big grid things, and that's essentially what they described. But on that note, we're going to talk more about it in the next epic stream. 5 hours of world-changing science knowledge drops, disclosure, discovery, and intellectual discussion. We're going to re-release this in some edited hour sessions. But until then, love you all. Catch you on the next one.